Welcome to another movie plot and enjoy the memories. It begins with the most loved Yakuza boss in all of Japan, Genyō Kamiura, teaching his gang that they need to protect the civilians. They're in the middle of a recession so horrible that young Masaru sharpens an axe for his father to kill him so that the rest of the family has enough food to survive. Their benevolent leader shows up just in the nick of time and gives the family some money, which is why his second-in-command Akira has always wanted to be just like him. He shadows his boss everywhere he goes and one day finds his love interest Kyōko being attacked by a rogue Yakuza who receives a beatdown by the gang's captain Sosuke. Alone one day wandering around his community, a rival gang attempt to jump Kamiura on the street, but he demonstrates his inhuman ability to withstand almost any injury. He's skewered by multiple swords as he cuts his way into the rival leader's office and even takes a bullet to the head. But none of it prevents Kamiura from killing his enemy and convincing everyone that his abilities are just the strong willpower of the Yakuza. What none of the gang know is that Kamiura is actually a vampire and must drink blood from people to recover, but hates having to harm civilians in the process. The only person who knows his secret's a bartender named Hogan who runs a sweatshop out back and tortures the workers by stomping their feet with his Geta sandals. They all get told that one day they'll eventually go to a place called Toyland but are just farmed for fresh blood to supply the town's vampire protector. He feeds a drink of blood to Akira, but he runs outside to throw it up as Kamiura says that he isn't ready to be a vampire yet. Wanting to be just like his boss, Akira returns and stomachs the next glass before returning to the clubhouse to get in an argument with a disgruntled Yakuza. He's chastised for not enduring tattoos like the rest of them, but Akira says that he has sensitive skin and has no need for them anyway. Later on though, while visiting Kyōko in the hospital, he admits that if he had one wish it would be to get a back piece just like the boss's. As he's leaving, the eavesdropping gang member Angus suggests that he asks Kyōko out, but Akira says that the girl's too smart to date Yakuza. He takes off to protect Kamiura, who's currently unguarded and is getting praised by Masaru's father for staving his hand earlier. Just then the pistol-wielding priest carrying a mini coffin on his back approaches as he's been hired by a rival gang to kill Kamiura. He's soon joined by a geeky little martial artist named Mad Dog who surprise attacks the boss while the priest murders Masaru's father when he tries to step in. The 5'2" assassin doesn't take a single lick of damage during their fight and instead leaves the Yakuza's greatest warrior beaten and bloodied in a back alley. Finally Akira arrives, but he's also no match for Mad Dog, who defeats him even quicker than his boss and leaves him unable to prevent what's to come. The killer priest pulls a funny-looking gun from the coffin that electrocutes Kamiura before his partner decapitates the vamp by twisting his head around until it pops off. Before he passes out, Akira witnesses that they've been betrayed by Sosuke and their fellow Yakuza Aratetsu. When they leave, he manages to crawl over to Kamiura's head, who isn't quite dead, and somehow propels himself forward to bite Akira in the neck. He turns his apprentice into a vampire who's immediately adorned with the boss's animated back tattoo before staggering around the streets confused. He comes across Yakuza who've resorted to extortion the moment they heard that the boss was gone and shoot Akira, but he's now immune to bullets. He kills them all with a single strike each when his hands begin to burn hot enough to cook an egg. Needing to feed, the blood rage overcomes Akira and he drinks the blood of the man that he just saved before realizing what he's done. He puts the gun to his head and attempts to punish himself, but the blood on his lips got into the bite and the man suddenly becomes a vampire. He leaps on his mortified wife, and due to the blood on his own lips she immediately becomes a vampire as well, and it begins to spread. The couple then chase a passing schoolgirl down the street through broad daylight before catching her and drinking her from both ends, initiating a vampire apocalypse. Akira doesn't seem to care about what he started and just goes to a public bathroom to attempt to end his life again when remembering to say goodbye to Kyōko. Returning to the hospital one last time, he tries to come up with a way to tell her that he's leaving without hurting her feelings. Meanwhile, the traders have begun cleaning house and discover Kamiura's sweatshop full of blood bags in the middle of a sewing class. All of them, including Sosuke, just now learn that their boss was a vampire when a second supernatural being enters the room called a Kappa. He's a creature from Japanese folklore with a beak for a mouth and turtle shell on his back, and talks about his boss coming to town, who he describes as a modern monster. Akira can't prevent himself from thinking about biting Kyoko's neck, so as she takes off her bandages to see him struggling, he runs away. He bumps into Nurse Mikiko, who he regretfully drinks the blood of before running away and having a dream that he's eating noodles. They turn out to be frog's eggs, but when he wakes up, Hogan's looking over him and says that the eggs are a good omen. He gives Akira the rundown on what it means to be a vampire, but says that he'll need to limit his intake of blood to 1 cup a day. Yakuza blood tastes disgusting and isn't nourishing enough for vampires, which is why Kamiura had his secret civilian feeding parties at the bar. With everything he's learned, Akira decides to visit Masaru, who's mourning the loss of his father, and offers him the ability to get his revenge. He turns the kid, and when Masaru rises, he's no longer the wimp he once was and rips off his hair for whatever reason before putting the axe through the coffee table. He becomes Akira's lieutenant and they form the largest gang in town, converting all the citizens into stronger versions of their previous selves. Aratetsu arrives at the safe house and orders his men to locate Akira before noticing that the captain started exhibiting strange behavior. She says that she hears a dripping noise, but it's just her brain starting to melt and it begins sporadically flowing out of her ear. The vampire schoolgirl turns the safe house into a gambling den and Mikiko leads them in a takeover as the people no longer need the Yakuza's protection. They all start to hear the dripping sound of Sosuke's brain, who nervously hides herself behind a sliding door before wandering off and needing to be chased down. Out on the streets, people are being run down all over the place by vampires, but they avoid the gang for their foul-tasting blood. A woman begs the Yakuza to help as it was their duty under Kamiura to protect them, but Aratetsu's less than enthused about it and asks a pair of local police to do it instead. The vampire duo don't bother to lift a finger when suddenly Sosuke returns and tells her gang that it's their own duty to protect their community. They come across the usually timid schoolteacher Sawada drinking the blood of a woman and finally standing up for himself against the gang. They're suddenly surrounded by vampires as Sawada bites another woman, but as she becomes one herself, she's immediately disgusted by the horrible smell of Yakuza blood. They're all allowed to leave as the vampires figure they must taste like crap, but run into Masaru, who's brought along the axe to exact his revenge. He takes a few swings from the roof of their vehicle before being thrown off at the feet of Akira, who now terrifies the gang. They take the long way back to the clubhouse but get followed by Akira, who easily defeats them all as he chases Sosuke into the boss's old office. With a spray of the ear matter, she orders her men to do something while she escapes, but when it's down to just Akira and Aratetsu, the assassins arrive. To the little guy's surprise, the vampire's now able to withstand the damage done to him, not like their first encounter, and returns even stronger. He defeats the first assassin when the priest whips out his coffin taser, but their fight gets interrupted by an explosive on a skateboard. It's a distraction by Hogan to get Akira out of there and back to his hideout to save him from the same fate as the boss. Kyōko shows up and they go for a walk where she learns from Akira that he's a vampire, but there's a sudden rumble indicating the modern monsters arrived. He's a man in a frog costume who's an expert martial artist and beats up a rookie gang on his way into the doomed town. At the Yakuza safe house, Mad Dog's being electrocuted for his failure while Aratetsu tries to stand up for himself, but he's terrified of the Kappa lieutenant. When his boss finally arrives, the frog's greeted with a warm welcome and given a jar of blood taken from Kamiura the night of his murder. It sets the frog monster off, who punishes the priest with his telekinetic abilities before being told to calm down by his Kappa friend. He takes out all of his anger with a baseball bat on the vampire blood bags, but after killing the whole room, he leaves Aratetsu and the two hitmen alive. The frog monster orders them to go after Akira again, but when he's the only one left, Mad Dog drinks the jar of immortal Yakuza blood. Feeling like he got punked, Aratetsu goes running to the captain, but she's gone full schizo and is watering plants with her brain matter. She hallucinates what she calls the garden of civilians as her seeds grow into little children, but the brothers Aratetsu and Angus just see a crappy greenhouse and decide to abandon her. Sosuke begins loading up her brain juice into containers with her few remaining men when they're ambushed by the vampire army led by Masaru. An all-out war begins, but before the boy can get his revenge, the ground suddenly begins to shake as the priest arrives with his frog boss on a bike. He rides straight into combat and begins attacking everybody from both sides as they all flee in horror from the world's most dangerous terrorist. Meanwhile, Akira finishes up with Kyōko and finds an appropriate cloak to be worn by a vampire for the climactic battle. The respectful frog allows Akira to first take Masaru to get his revenge, and when the dopey captain offers him a piece of fish cake, the boy plunges his axe into her skull. The frog applauds his work and challenges the worthy opponent Akira to a fair fight where they're relatively evenly matched. When the vampire begins to win, the cheating amphibian resorts to using his telekinetic powers and a set of nunchucks to defeat him. Suddenly, Aratetsu and Angus arrive in a pimped-out truck with miniguns that the bullet-deflecting frog struggles to defend against. When that doesn't work, Angus accelerates, crushing him under the truck, but the frog monster just gets back up and starts trashing the place in anger. Angus attempts to throw a grenade at him, but the frog catches it and puts it under his feet to launch himself for an aerial attack. He beats up Angus before Akira can show up and save him, and the three Yakuza team up to take on their mutual enemy. Aratetsu goes after the priest alone and demonstrates that it wasn't because the boss was a vampire but his endurance as Yakuza that he was able to withstand the gunshots. But unlike the vampire, Aratetsu's not an immortal and dies from his wounds before his brother can arrive. The vampire Yakuza throws down with the frog monster, who removes his costume to reveal himself as an actual frog man who fights much better without it. While Akira's on the brink of defeat and knocked to the ground, Angus attempts to use the last of his grenades to kamikaze into the frog, but he's held back by its powers and made to set the explosives off on himself. Akira returns and takes a punch to the stomach from the frog monster, but when returning with one of his own, he removes the band-aids covering his navel. It causes the frog to go into spasms before collapsing to the ground dead and letting out a beam of light as the world begins to rumble again. It awakens a giant frog monster fully clothed and abed as solar flares begin to erupt and he breathes fire from his suit. Just then the empowered Mad Dog arrives to challenge Akira while he's weakened, but Kyōko shows up to offer her blood so that he can prepare. Akira refuses with a kiss before he and Mad Dog strip down to their tattoos for a drawn-out test of strength. They trade punches repeatedly back and forth without flinching until eventually it becomes too much for Mad Dog, who collapses to the ground defeated. As it approaches the city, the giant vengeful frog monster starts destroying the landscape, so Akira grows a set of bat wings before flying off to fight it. And the movie ends.